Hello everyone, my name is Benedict Letiani. I'm a postgraduate student at the University of Cape Town in South Africa. Born with a congenital glaucoma, I attended a special school for the blind in Free State here in South Africa. Since high school, I have been actively involved in the disability awareness, rights, and inclusion campaigns. In this video, I'm going to be talking about personal experiences of education from the visually impaired and blind learners' perspectives. What I really intend to do is to try to provide an answer to the following questions. How do visually impaired and blind learners experience education? And what works in supporting our learning? The aim here is to ensure that educators and those involved in teaching blind and visually impaired learners have an idea of how to support us. I am going to focus on three areas. Firstly, our experiences of the school curriculum. Here, I address the question, how did we as visually impaired and blind learners cope with the curriculum? Secondly, teacher engagement with learners. How did our teachers ensure that we fully comprehend the content of the curriculum? And finally, creating an enabling environment. How was the classroom setting? Let's start with the school curriculum in terms of course content. I don't think there's any course or subject a blind or visually impaired person cannot do. If all the curriculum content can be accessible with assistive devices for blind and visually impaired learners, it will definitely break all barriers to education and enable accessible curriculum. Fortunately, I was in a school where all of my materials were provided in Braille for blind learners like me, and my friends and classmates who are visually impaired receive enlarged reading materials. In some instances, provision of glasses were provided to assist with vision improvement for completion of curriculum content. Another thing that worked well in my school regarding the curriculum was extra time allowances for blind learners as approved by the Education Department in South Africa. As a blind learner, I was allocated extra time to complete test, exam, and essays. For instance, a 3-hour business economics exam paper will have 45 minutes added to it for visually impaired and blind learners, meaning an extra 15 minutes per hour. The motive for this additional time is to ensure that visually impaired and blind learners receive sufficient time to complete their assessment, given that it takes more time to read Braille as well as position our fingers correctly on the keyboard if using a computer. In my school, different resources in terms of assistive devices were used to complete the syllabus. For instance, Perkins Braille's computer with JAWS, Job Access with Speech, and Zoom Text, and Braille books. Braille is an essential tool to all blind learners. It gives us confidence and independence. It is the first means of writing and reading that we are taught at school. It allows us to feel the shape of the alphabet and words. At my school, we had textbooks in Braille and Perkins Braille's. It is incredible to have these devices because one feels like a sighted child with a pen and a book. Most of us preferred academic text in Braille than electronic. Our teachers knew Braille, and as a result, were able to mark our papers. As for JAWS and Zoom Text, These assistive devices gave us the opportunity to access computers' functions and to be able to do the academic work faster. Also, it was easier to access the internet for research purposes with JAWS and Zoom text. I must emphasize that JAWS is not a substitute of Braille. It is important that blind children learn Braille. Let's move on to engaging with learners. Engaging with teachers is one of the most crucial things for blind learners. If we fail to engage or understand our teachers, we are definitely doomed to fail. Instead of giving a long list of things to do, I found educators who were flexible in their teaching methods to be much more flexible in how I learned and understood different content. Sometimes assistive devices cannot help the learner satisfactorily. For instance, if a blind learner or visually impaired is asked to describe a diagram or a map, in this case, an educator can use many different resources in the classroom to form a map, a picture, or an idea to allow a learner to use his or her hands to feel and understand what is being expressed or taught. Our geography teacher used to create a map by using string, hard paper, soil, grass, and glue. She would glue the string on the paper in a shape of the continent and use grass and soil to differentiate countries. For instance, a grass would be glued next to South Africa and soil next to Ghana. Then we would use our fingers to navigate the map and identify countries. Lastly, the creation of an accommodating environment. In this context, environment refers to the classroom setting. Depending on the size of the class, certain methods are more helpful than others. For instance, if the class is big or has a number of learners, it would be useful to put all visually impaired learners in front. This will ensure that they are able to view the board or the projector much better than sitting at the back of the classroom. In my school, we had a small class comprising of 5 to 15 learners. We all sat in a circle in front of the teacher, and learners who had some vision sat closer to the board. When I reached university and was in much bigger classes, I found it easier to sit in front of the lecture theater because then I could easily record what the lecture is saying. It is also important to be cognizant of light and weather temperature as it affects learners' participation. For instance, it is challenging for me and perhaps some other blind learners to read Braille when our hands are cold, particularly in the morning. In my school, most of the reading periods were after 10 in the morning or after break. Another method is to avoid outside activities when it is too windy or when it is raining, as it makes it quite challenging or impossible for blind people to identify their surroundings under these conditions. I feel very distracted and disorientated in these kind of conditions. It is also good to provide mobility orientation, not necessarily a formal mobility, just to ensure that the learners has a sense of his or her physical environment. Provision of mobility gives us confidence. Most of my schoolmates did not use white canes at school at all. We could easily move from classes to school hall, hostels, and sport field. This is not to say that blind or visually impaired learners should not use white canes, but it indicates how confident we were and how valuable mobility training is for school learners. In conclusion, visually impaired and blind learners can easily be included within a mainstream school if teachers are willing to adapt their methods and learn new skills to help facilitate learning. What is very much needed is an understanding of their conditions and ways of accommodating them. The most important thing is for teachers to be flexible and open-minded.